Hello, this is an assessment of a Richard Lipp upright piano made in 1913, 130 centimetres tall, so it's a relatively tall upright, and it's a very impressive piano. Really, Richard Lipp of this period, 1913. There's no better upright piano. There's some obviously the same quality, but always impressed with Richard Lipp, and I always had Richard Lipp grands in my house for a long time, and now I tend to have a variety of them. Looking at the case, the top is the main problem here. Our polisher could make good and try and get rid of, and may have to repolish the top. The problem with repolishing is it's got to integrate with the rest of the piano, but certainly we can try and work on that. The rest of the casework is reasonable. It's a rosewood piano, so obviously rosewood's an excellent wood. And looking across here, you see the Richard Lipp and Son. That's the more modern style. I think from about 1905 roughly, that became the modern style. It's not so ornate as the old one. And this was originally sold by someone called Donkin and Dodds. I don't know if I've heard of them before. But the main thing is the case first of all. So we can see it would definitely repolish beautifully if you wanted it fully repolished, but it's about 65 hours for an upright, not much less than a grand because it's a bit bitty to do uprights. That's French polishing, of course, so French polishing takes that long, and there's 30 coats of polish applied roughly, and then antique waxed afterwards to make it look like an antique style furniture. Looking at the back while we're at it, it has a mesh on the back, which a lot of top quality pianos do, and that's broken. It doesn't really matter, and you could obviously have that mesh taken off, and we'd normally put some sort of cloth on instead, but you could take the mesh off and leave it off. That was for the days when there weren't hoovers, and there was quite a lot of dust behind it, but it's perfectly right. Looked at the soundboard and that's in perfect condition. The casters are rather uneven and don't move very well, so that's something we can look into improving. Now, the pedals aren't incredibly worn. They've obviously been played a reasonable amount, but they're sloping down, which always helps for comfort. And they're set at 7.5 from the floor, which is about average for new pianos as well. And the leg room is 63 centimetres, which is slightly higher than average, so it's good for tall people. Now, it's got 85 keys, as a lot of pianos in this age do, and a lot of Richard Lipps do, Bechsteins as well, Bluteners. They often have 85 keys, which is not a problem for studying. And you can see they're generally in good condition. That's been taken off and stuck back on. There are a couple of chips. There's one here that's a bit chipped, and they're dull, so they need buffing, and that's definitely an improvement we could make and try and disguise these chips as well as we can. Our team seems to be able to disguise them very well, and you wouldn't hardly notice they're there. The piano's been open a bit more than it's been closed. As you can see, there's a little bit darker on here than here, but not significantly so. So it's been closed for some time, I would say. Interestingly, there's varying fading there for some reason. Now, looking at the inside of the piano, it just oozes quality in so many ways. I can't say enough about how good Richard Lipp pianos are. These hammers here, you notice that it's like a grand piano. They go right through. If you look at normal hammers, most hammers, the shank doesn't go right through to the top. Here's a Yamaha U3, for instance, and you can see you can't see the shank through there. So it's like a grand piano, the Lipp, that's taken the shank right through. I think it probably does have some advantage for fine adjustments when you're putting the hammers on, though it's quite difficult cosmetically to get it to look good compared to not going right through. But it's obviously the firm's trying to do the very best they can. You see the agraffs here go right up to the top of the piano. That's always a sign of a good piano, like top quality pianos like the Bechsteins, for instance. And these strings are extremely well angled. If we listen to the tone of the piano, that's compromised slightly by regulation. That's not checking properly, and it's checking too close. We did find one here where the let-off was causing it to really just make the string not sound at all. The dampers are very early. If you look at the dampers there, they're lifting off far too early. It makes them very heavy in the bass, and they're slightly better further up, but they're still too early. Really should be a half to well, certainly a third to 2/3 is the sort of range you can have them in. And I would have these ones lifting off a lot later, where they're a bit shorter because they're crossing over. They're damping well though, as you can hear. That's almost as good as you'll get. Bit out of tune there. The piano's at concert pitch and generally in tune with itself too. Now, tuning pins are tight, which is really important. These are original tuning pins too, original strings, and you can see that my tuning lever here, it says medium star, is very loose, so that indicates they're original pins. A lot of top manufacturers use very small pins, which is really useful if you want to restring the piano. Then you don't have to go up to maximum size, you can just put slightly bigger ones in. Now the hammers have been refaced, but there's plenty of felt left on them, and the tone here is excellent. It just needs fine voicing of it. Listening to one thing about Lips, which we've noticed, is it's very hard to cut off the bass strings very often. So when you play this, for instance, you can hear a lot of echo. You can hear some echo now, partly because I've got grand pianos stored as well, and they're on their side and they're echoing in sympathy. But let's listen to that compared to a Yamaha. So there's less reverb on this. The bass is not so resonant. Still a good piano. This is an older Yamaha, so it's an excellent piano. But this is much more resonant. Looking down the bottom of the piano, it's got a clean bill of health too. Someone's installed a damp chaser. That's a rod that heats up slightly and encourages it to be drier, shall we say. That's not connected at the moment, but it's a good idea if you're in if the piano's in a location which tends to get damp, or maybe an institution which varies in temperature, then that's a good idea to have a damp chaser. The worksheet here shows the main work that needs doing. The keys, the balance rail needs lubricating. I didn't show that earlier, but this is a job we always tend to do. Buffing the keys, because they're and also repairing the chips. The buffing the keys will make them shinier and stop them attracting dirt. And regulation is the other job, regulating dampers particularly, and the back checks. So very impressed with this piano indeed. It's had a damp chaser fitted, which is useful to fit if you not if you're in a normal centrally heated house, but if you're in a dampish place, then that's a good idea. It stops the action seizing up and stops any damage to the piano in general. And has some new tapes and regulations already been done on the piano in the past. So one of the finest uprights ever made, I've written there, because I want to encourage people to know that Richard Lipp is such a high quality maker of piano, and gets overlooked because there are not so many as there are Bechsteins and Blutners and Steinways and Bosendorfers. In fact, there aren't that many Bosendorfers really, but Lipp is such a high quality make. So it's a Richard Lipp upright piano made in 1913 and 130 centimetres tall, and a kind of piano we're always trying to source ourselves. We've sold quite a few of these uprights. The main issue sometimes is that the bass resonates with the middle area. We've mentioned that about other pianos too. High quality pianos often have very resonant basses, and if you're expecting a very precise cut-off, you don't get it, although on this one it's not that noticeable, so not that much worth mentioning, but just mentioning it for Richard Lipp in general. And there's not huge amounts of sort of basic work to do. Certainly the strings and hammers are very good, and everything's in good condition. It's regulation mainly. Key weighting's actually quite good, as you would have noticed on that worksheet. I'm sorry I forgot to draw attention to that, but and the tone, well, it's excellent. A little bit out of tune here and there, but generally kept in tune very well indeed. So So if you're interested in having a piano restored, please write to us, info@robertspianos.com, and let us know what you'd like to do. Thank you very much for listening.